All right, guys, so today we'll be talking about the branches of government. At any time during this video, if you need to pause it and write down the notes, feel free to. So we'll get into it. So how many branches of government are there? So we should know this because we talked about it during the Constitutional Convention last week. Because if you remember, in the Articles of Confederation, they only had one branch, and that would be legislative. Okay, remember they could make laws, but they couldn't enforce them, and they couldn't decide if the laws were constitutional or not. So they didn't have a judicial system. So the three branches of government will be legislative, executive, and judicial. So on this very first one, I want you to divide your paper into three sections, kind of like how you see in this chart. So legislative has a section, executive has a section, and judicial has a section. After you have done this, underneath each one, I just want you to write this one fact under each one. So under legislative, I want you to put that they make laws. Under executive, they sign the laws. And then under judicial, but decide if the laws are constitutional. So you may need to pause the video now and write these down. So it's just the first fact under each one. So legislative makes the laws, executive signs the laws, and then judicial decides if the laws are constitutional. So who is in charge of the executive branch? So, that's going to be the President of the United States. So this will be Donald Trump until January when Biden will take office. But the President is in charge of the executive branch. How long does the President, how long is his term? As we know, most of you know, it's 4 years, and he can only serve 2 terms. So maximum he can serve 8 years. So like I said, how many terms can the president serve? It's going to be 2. The 2 4-year terms is the maximum that he can serve in office. So it's for a total of 8 years. How old must the person be to become president? So under the Constitution, the president has to be at least 35 years of age. Obviously, we know most are much older than that. That is the minimum requirement for the president. So what requirements are there to be elected president? So for one, you have to be a citizen by birth. So as we go through, we'll talk about some like the House of Representatives and the Senate. They all have requirements to become. We'll see the president is the only one that has to be a citizen by birth. We just talked about it, but you have to at least be 35 years of age to become president and live in the U.S. for at least 14 years. So those are the main requirements to become elected president. So the president, he has the power to make treaties. The Senate must approve. So the president cannot make a treaty with a different country without the Senate's approval, because that would be more like a dictatorship if he decides to do this on himself. So he cannot do it. He has to have the Senate's approval. So what is a treaty? We've talked about this with some different treaties in the past regarding like the revolution, but it's an agreement between countries. So that's a treaty, agreement between countries. And then can individual states make treaties? No, that would be unconstitutional. So North Carolina cannot make a treaty with China. So it has to be the country as a whole. So no individual state can make a treaty. So his role as a president is a legislative leader. So if I haven't told you this before, most of the facts up until now will be going under the executive branch because it's been talking about the president. So most of the facts that we went over, you'll be putting under the executive branch on your chart that you're making. All right, so the president, his role in the legislative leader is to propose laws to Congress. So what does it mean by propose? It means to come up with or put forward. So he can put forward an idea to the legislative branch, but he can't pass them from there. So he can put forward and they can talk about them and vote them into law if that's something that sounds correct to them. So whose approval is required to override a president's veto? So if the veto, meaning the president shuts a law down, or a bill, I'm sorry. So if a bill comes to his desk and he does not agree with it and he puts a veto stamp on it. But both the House and the Congress both think that it would be a positive bill or positive law, they can override the president's veto. So that it has to be both the House and the Senate to both agree to go forward, and they can override the presidential veto. So how many houses are there in Congress? So we talked about this last week during the Constitutional Convention. During the Great Compromise, they came up with 2. So they had the House of Representatives and the Senate. So which one made the small states happy? Okay, it's going to be the Senate. Remember, they wanted equal power for everyone, regardless of the population size. So remember, Senate will have 2 representatives per state, regardless of the size. And then the House of Representatives made the larger states happy because the more power goes to the more population that you have in the state, because you get more representatives. So 2 houses. All right, so what branch is Congress? So you put this on your legislative branch. So make sure you write that Congress is a part of the legislative branch. So make sure you write that down on your paper. So what branch makes laws? So we should know this. That's going to be the legislative branch. So legislative branch makes the laws. So we talked about that was the only branch that they had under the Articles of Confederation, and one reason that it failed. So we have the House of Representatives. So under the House of Representatives, there's going to be a total members of 435 members. You serve 2 terms if you're a member of the House. So for the qualifications, so we talked about the qualifications for president, and now we're going to talk about them for the House of Representatives. So under the Constitution, it says that the members of the House must be at least 25 years of age, must have been a citizen of the United States for at least 7 years, and must be an inhabitant of the state from which he or she is elected. So could I be a part of the House of Representatives for California? No. I would meet, let's see, 2 out of the 3. So I am 25 years of age. I am a citizen of the United States, but I am not an inhabitant of the state of California, where I would be elected. So I could be part of the House in North Carolina, but I could not be in California. And then we have the Senate. So the Senate is going to be a little bit higher qualifications to become a senator. So the term is going to be 6 years. You have 2 senators per state, regardless of the size of the state. Total members will be 100. So qualifications. So a senator must meet a higher level of qualifications than those of the House. So a senator must be at least 30 years of age, so 5 years older than the House. A senator must have been a citizen of the United States for at least 9 years instead of 7. And a senator must be an inhabitant of the state from which he or she is elected. So just the same as the House of Representatives. So like I said, I could be a member of the House of Representatives from North Carolina. I would meet those requirements, but I would not be meet the requirements to become a senator. I'm not old enough for that one. So there are stricter qualifications to become a senator. So who's in charge of the House of Representatives? So that's going to be the Speaker of the House. So make sure you put that under the legislative tab that you have. So who's in charge of the House of Representatives? The Speaker of the House is going to be in charge of the House of Representatives. So make sure you put that down now under the legislative branch, because you'll see this again. So war. War can only be declared by Congress. So a lot of people have the misconception that war can be declared by the president. That's false. So Congress has to be the one that decides and declares war. Where they get that confused is the president can send our troops to battle. So the president, the commander-in-chief, he can send troops into battle, but he cannot declare war. That has to be Congress. So what branch is the Supreme Court in? So you should know this as well. It's the last one. So under the judicial branch, this is where the Supreme Court lies. So judicial branch is where the judges in the court system. This is where the Supreme Court, it's the branch that the Supreme Court is in, judicial branch. There are 9 Supreme Court justices or judges. So make sure also that you write this down as well. So 9 Supreme Court justices or judges. So you'll see this again as well. So make sure you know that number. So the Supreme Court interprets the law or decides if they are fair or constitutional. So through the judicial review, this is when the Supreme Court decides if a law is within the framework of the Constitution. So really the Constitution is used on a daily basis in the court system because everything is based around the constitutional or around the Constitution. And if the verdict that they're deciding has to be backed and look against the Constitution to make sure it aligns correctly. So how long does the federal court justice keep their job? This one's going to be a life term, so until they die or retire, so up to them. So they don't have a set number of years. They get to keep their job until they die or retire. So you might want to write that down as well. So what is the leader of the justice on the Supreme Court called? So the leader of the Supreme Court justice is the Chief Justice. So think of it as the Chief Judge. So Chief Justice, the leader of the Supreme Court. And here's just a diagram of showing the checks and balances system, just showing that one branch can't hold more power than the other. So if you follow the arrow, you'll go around almost in like a circle, showing you that like the executive branch can't hold all the power because it has to go to the legislative branch for certain things, or the judicial branch for certain things, and vice versa with the judicial and the legislative. So if you want to read this over, you can, but it just shows how the checks and balances work. So what is the only reason a president can serve more than 8-year term? So we talked about earlier, the president can serve 4 years as a one term, and they can serve that term twice, total 8 years. But if the president, let's say Mike Pence, something happened to Trump, 2 years into his term, Mike Pence took over as president with 2 years remaining of Trump's term. He served those 2 years. He now can still run for 2 more terms if he's elected. So he runs again for another 4 years. That means he's 6 years total president, and he still has 1 more term if he's elected. He can run. So total, that can be 10 years of president. So that's the maximum amount if a president can serve under that circumstance. So what part of Congress deals with taxes? It's going to be the House of Representatives that determines the tax rates. House of Representatives are the part that determines the taxes. So I want to put that down as well under legislative. And lastly, what is elastic clause? So it is the power given to Congress to change and amend constitutional rights to meet changing conditions. Think about it. There's no such thing as Air Force, airplanes, any of that technology back when the Constitution was written. So the elastic clause is given in the right to make changes to the Constitution with technology advancements such as airplanes, Air Force, and there'll be, I'm sure, more going forward. All right.